thought I'd take a little bit of time to talk about swaddling. A mom happily posted her video to get help with vision, and the baby was swaddled, and everybody's jumping in. And I wanted to first of all say, anything you do with a child, your life, anybody's life, whether it regards to movement, cognitive, it's not about do or don't do. We have to offer solutions. And to offer solutions, we have to understand why, right? I've done a lot of different trainings, and I think some people think that at times I was being a little bit stubborn, and it wasn't. Maybe it's my New York, New Jersey, raised by a German, I don't know. But I just want to know why, and as I questioned why, I discovered more things. So it's one of the reasons why I'm introducing my own reflex course, not to say that it's a competition and so forth, but I think there's a grave misunderstanding that people think that babies pattern from some kind of lizard brain, and it goes into an immature neurological brain, and it develops into the human cognitive information, and that's not where reflexes come from. I'm presenting that in the womb, you are meant to grow in all directions in a frictionless environment, okay? What does that mean? So some people see the uncurling and so forth, but as the cells move, there's a float that goes on to expand and to grow. Your brain needs to grow equally in all directions, which doesn't happen with gravity. With gravity, there tends to be a down and an up. So when you have amniotic fluid, and there's been some nice studies out of India. There's a big gravity guy, and he's trying to do cellular gravity on an embryo and in a fetus. But my point is, the difference though in the womb is there's no elimination, meaning you're not breathing, you're not eating, you're not eliminating waste, you're not eliminating air. So you don't have this friction that can create with expansion mode. And I know I get them into a lot of details, and most of you don't care to know this or don't need to know this, but this is where my brain goes, right? Because I just want to understand the process of movement. And the process of movement, yes, is going to be different with genetics and trauma and environment. Just me riding a no-speed bicycle, right, versus what, a high-performance person would be on. They're on a different bicycle. That alone, their performance is going to be different. It's not that you could have the two same bodies, but if you give an immature bike, right, to a mature bike, you're going to get different performance. And that's really not much different than you or I when we're doing new things. Just as you and I get into certain things and we're not used to that learning curve, right? So to go back into a new task, let's say, we get to a certain age, we don't want to go back and be a novice. So when you're expanding in all directions equally, right, in a frictionless environment, what is friction? Cord around the neck. Arthrogryposis, when you start seeing, hands should not cross in the womb whatsoever, because it will cause friction in the cellular development of the system, right? And it will go on. So the baby actually should be like this. And this is where we're quite habitual, as what we prefer is this or this. What's habitual? If I ask everyone to lace their fingers, they will naturally go into a sequence that's particular to you, which I believe has to do with the womb, right? But if I asked you now to alternate that, some of you might actually be like, but you should be able to just equally interlace your fingers, and that could be very difficult for some people. So a frictionless environment, that starts to happen, right? So if a baby presents the breech, all of those, now we're getting into deviations, right? It's not about wrong or right, we're deviating. So when a baby is about to present, the head starts to go into position. It's very particular that it goes into the occiput, which is the back of the head. The mom's pubic bone is here. The baby will be here. And as it starts to deliver, it will go in, and that's why the mastoid is still individual here. That will roll. So if any of the children have suture interruptions, right? This will show up in delivery and the baby can get stuck. If the head shape starts to change, if it's been in the vaginal canal too long, again, now these are what I would say are not only structural deviations, but environmental. And that's the first rotation. Babies do not rotate. They can't throw a punch. If they expand and start using some of their movements. But another thing that happens during delivery is you have active muscles, which is the contractions, and then you have passive muscles where the baby can get into position. This is also the first transfer of active and passive force into the baby. So again, I get it. You might have had a C-section. We're there to save the baby and to save you. So it's not about to say, just like swaddling, oh, you shouldn't have had a C-section. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And now that you've had one C-section, if you want 5 children, they're all going to have to be C-sectioned, let's say. So things do happen. But with movement lesson, this is what we're here is to explain what movement is. And so when movement gets deviated or interrupted or not even exposed to, then we manually have to go in and offer that. This is that key where I don't like this wait and see. You already have a cocktail happening of, let's say, a C-section, 4 or 5 days in the NICU. You know what I mean? The conversation is starting to happen. And we want to be there and be proactive and say, there's certain things that were missed. Now let's say, a premature child. The skin grows first, your epidermis. It's one of your most important and underrated organs out there because that's what regulates the world to your body. Is your skin function, your organs function, and it's called the epidermis, right? So your skin grows first, and then during your last weeks of development in the womb, you're gaining about 1 pound a week. So the skin, like a balloon, will expand and go. So a premature baby is born now with too much skin in a sense, or the skin to body or fluid mass ratio is different than a full-term baby, right? Again, these are deviations. So what happens? There's less of a chance of weight transfer through natural force, and you'll get more of these startles. So to calm a baby down, a lot of people introduced swaddling. But the swaddling lots of times is also looked at as this is how you get the baby to sleep. This is how you get to baby, or it brings back memories of the womb. Hence delivery. We're done with the womb time, right? Womb time is done. And I get it. We just want our babies. We don't want them to cry. But one of the things I have to teach here is babies need to cry. Babies need to, there's a difference between I'm hungry to just barking. Do you see kids even when they're 2? These create forces in the body. This is what the epidermis works with, and that goes on. Now, another thing that happens is from the birth on, it's the first time that your bones, your skeletal bones, are exposed to a phenomenon called buoyancy, right? This is stuff that I'm presenting in my gravity book. And by the way, my Harvard demonstration, if you want to watch that on infant developmental movement patterns, will take you through this into more development of the child from birth to 4.5 months, that you can see, different aspects of development within this process. And I'm going to link that. And I'm also going to link after this. I was able to meet with Lucas in the hospital. I work with the family here. Typical kids, nothing wrong with them. I think a lot of people think that I only work with people that are really headed again towards deviations. And I'm just seeing his brother right now. He's 3 years old, and his parents are active horse people, and he's just getting ready for his stuff. So when you're first being born, so anyway, with Lucas, I show how to, in a sense, birth or unswaddle a baby in a hospital. So I'll be playing that within this conversation. And I have plenty of videos of me in the NICU and things like that that you can look at where I'm at. So the first developmental milestone actually that happens, and this is stuff that you learn in the cranial course, is again, your bones are meant to be subluxed. And so as the baby is coming out, right, this is this first exposure to gravity. So imagine if you had a balloon, a cold balloon from cold temperature going into hot temperature, right? Just that expansion of helium creates that whoosh. Not much different than your baby, right? Or like a champagne cork, I hate to say it. But the parietal bones, and they're quite large, almost like a ladybug or a jellyfish, will hit gravity, and that's your extension. That brings in the neck, that brings in all of that. It is the first articulation of skeletal bones, and it goes against gravity, right? What that also is happening right then, it pulls the pellet up, right? Creates a cavity. And another one I'll post is a live version of an MRI of a birth. You can see all of this. And it pulls the tongue. So one of the things I present is sucking's not a reflex. That's in my paper, and again, my Harvard presentation of infant developmental movement patterns. So when that champagne cork, or what's called cavitation, happens, right, there's foam in your lungs, just like there's the same instance in champagne, the cavitation, and that hits, and all the nitrogen, oxygen, carbon release and hit into that lungs. So there's an expansion of the inner lungs as well as a draw of the breath, and that's where the epidermis and the intercostal muscles in between the ribs create muscle tonus, right? If those ribs do not expand from the inside out, from the outside in, and all of that first breath, and that snap, almost like a rubber band or just snapping into place, right? If that doesn't happen, I'm going to tell you right now, you've got muscle tonus issues, either for low tone or high tone, right? And so that's where, too, I've created the breathing course, which is a free course. It's a great course to regulate and bring that. And now, again, this happens in all directions, right? A baby, and that's one of the importance of tummy time. It's not so much that you put a child on their tummy. Their spines need to breathe. The back of the pelvis needs to breathe, right? In tummy time, and that's going to be another video that I'm putting with this, in tummy time, and that's where I had the sensory mat, so close to clinical trials and COVID hits, but I've developed a mat to censor all this. 1,800 movements within 1 minute of tummy time. These movements, and again, this is where I talk about compounded interest, are substantial for the rest of your life. And again, nothing that I'm saying I want to put a child in harm's way. There are exceptions to every rule. So please, I get it that people are saying, my kid did that and they were fine. Okay, great. But my kid didn't do it and they never were fine, right? So we do have that fine line. And really, if you're looking at the statistics, the kids aren't winning. Right? There's more and more kids that are special needs. Now, they have this baloney that kids are surviving traumatic births way more successfully than they did, let's say, 10, 20 years ago. That might be the case in something that doesn't justify the math. You can't tell me that autism used to go to 1 to 3,000 and now is in 1 in 45. Flatheads are now 65% in all babies, and they're still trying to say it doesn't affect development. You're out of your mind if you think, and I don't mean to be callous by that giggle, that was sarcasm, I'm from New York. If you think that a flathead is not going to affect development, the baby is no longer in neutral, right? Neutral is where it needs to be. So these bones, right, they expand. And so these are your first refluxes, is actually the skeletal system learning how to move in gravity. If you look at plantar and palmar with the reflexes that are supposedly in the hands, they are not open and close. That is not a reflex, right? I get it, I should be able to close my hands and I should open it. But what is actually happening, right, almost like an amoeba, the baby's hands and feet are going in and out of gravity, and by doing that, they create a counter. This is why the human body is set up with 2 bones on the extremities, almost like a rudder on a plane. Otherwise, we'd be stick figures and the hands would go like that you see in animated skeletal stuff, because they don't realize that elbow crossing midline and all of that. These are movements, compounded movements that don't happen when a baby's swaddled. So again, the decision to swaddle really has to be made as to what's up with the child. Because if the child's not sleeping, that's your number one. But I'm telling you right now, if a child needs to be swaddled, they need a movement lesson or some form of early intervention sooner than later. But the mathematics of early intervention, like in Arizona, you have to be 50% delayed or 25% in 2 areas or more. These figures don't hit a 2-day-old baby. These kind of things. So again, even though a child's been in the NICU, even though the child was born premature, that gap in follow-up is just huge. Some programs do have sort of a nursing program. They're coming in. But again, that's more for the child's health. Are the lungs mature enough and that? So those are the things I want you to consider. Again, it's not about to do or not to do a movement. It's why are we deciding to do this? Why are we doing that? If you look at all the ads, all the baby shower gifts, the top 10 gifts to give a baby create immobility and movement. Swings, high chairs, the worst. Okay, if we want to have an argument, those eggy things, no. This, because again, so we're moving off of the Earth's rotation, right? The eggy thing changes those dynamics, right? And I get it. Someone's going to say to me, and again, I'm not here to create fault. What I'm here to say is certain movements based off of your experience didn't happen. Just like I didn't take soccer, right? So if I went out and played against Pele, you can show my age because I know who Pele is. If I went out to play, even though he's retired and all that, he would be supreme next to me because I didn't have exposure to those movements. My vision didn't have exposure to the ball ratio. And this is where I talk about vision all the time, right? Again, if your baby is not in these kind of modes, look at what's happening with the vision, with that countering. So when they're here, and yeah, this is why the conversation, the vision seems off, and it is going off. But it's finding out what's up with the movement and then how we can not only assess the child. Everybody will tell you what's wrong. Everybody will tell you what's wrong. Well, who you want to listen to are the people who are saying, okay, I have a solution to your situation, So this is where, too, it's that fine line. Even if you do have a diagnosis, no 2 kids with cerebral palsy are the same. No 2 kids with autism are the same. Like the fallacy of my kid hits himself. Oh, yeah, it's because of autism. Autistic kids don't hit themselves, right? There's something going on. They're capable of doing it. It's up to us to find out where the stress is coming from, where they feel they have a headache or reflux that we're not catching, let's say, or something that's paining them and they want to get it out. The tantrums, the exposures, and so forth like that. That's not neurological. I've had babies coming in here screaming and the parents were told that's a neurological response. I've worked on thousands of children. Let me tell you, that just shouldn't be the case. If a baby is crying, there's something going on. The hospital sent me home saying we don't treat fussy babies after my son was for 2 days. They never examined him and he had Haemophilus influenza and staph. So, you know, and now after all that, of 3 years, you would have no idea, you know, it probably devastated a marriage because I was so determined to help him. It devastated a lot of lives. Going to doctors, determined that I knew something was wrong with my child, and being told I was a nut job. And afterwards, you know, when infectious disease finally came into my life, and he's like, Mom, you know, where's he been? You know, we've got to shut down, we've got to put out a warning, we've got to shut down maybe half of Phoenix. Like, I could have been the first of a pandemic. And I'm like, guys, he's been to Monster Jam in preschool. Where have you been? Like, where have you been? Like, for 3 years, I'm going around trying to find out why my son's hair is falling out. He had HIV lesions and on the nut job, I was told he had bug bites. So again, had I listened to a lot of people, so I'm not trying to convince you with all this to listen to me. I want you to understand where movement comes from. I want you to understand when movement is deviated, just like taking a detour on a road, or you decide to put off college for a year. We all have deviations in our life, but when we have a cognitive brain, now we can have comparisons. A baby is not in that mode of comparisons. Hi, Iridim. A baby is in of mode of experiencing movement. These movements are the foundations for all of cognition. Another way of looking at swaddling in that way, you can say, again, more rural countries do it and the children are fine. I'm sorry to say you're not getting scientists, you're not getting mathematicians. It's not about to swaddle or not to swaddle. It's offering a brain an opportunity that needs to happen and can happen. And when it's not happening, it's then that we need to be proactive in our child's life to find a solution. So after said and done with my son, how many people have said to me, do you know how much pain he must have been? He had a sinus infection for how long? 3 years? Oh my God, if I've had, duh. Of course my kid was in pain. You know, I knew that, but I'm going to National Jewish, UCSD, all of these people, I'm going to supposedly top doctors of the world. And that's where too, if I tell you guys, when you say, hey, I went to the head of such and such hospital or one of the best in my country, it wasn't the right exam for your child. That person might be amazing. Maybe they just had an off day. But if I see a situation where your child's not getting the best help, I'm just your advocate. I'm your advocate as a mom who has been through it, and nobody should go through what my son went through, not me, and all of that. So I hope this helps you understand swaddling. Another thing just to add, because I have someone here actually, you're seeing him with who's a foster. So Mom and Dad wasn't involved. I have someone here from India right now who adopted a beautiful little girl. Again, there are situations that have happened. You don't know their movement vocabulary from birth. You might not know only what they feel you needed to know. And this is where too, learning that movement lesson touch, it'll guide you in a way of finding out what's going on inside the system. And my last point on that, I had an 88-year-old that came to me who had fallen and broken his hip. And now this has, quote, nothing to do with swaddling, but it does. I was told surgery's fine. He's not walking. We need to get him off this walker. At 88, most people would say, you're on a walker. You just broke your hip. So I touched him. And I've only had this with near drownings, people that have survived near drownings, but there was a quiver. I said, where's the trauma? No trauma. No, the surgery was... You're saying that, he's saying that. His system is shaking. And at 88, it can't withstand that. And I'm trying to find out what went on. And finally the wife said, well, does it matter when one leg is longer than the other? And I said, well, it's really a parlor trick. You know, the pelvis makes up the difference of leg length. That's why if we go up and down the stairs, like when I go to India, right? India doesn't have code for steps. We're so used to that 8 3/4 run at a 33-degree angle or whatever it is. My architecture's I'm not up on codes, but you can have a step here and you know what I mean? Like South Africa, same thing. I'd be going up the stairs going, this isn't code. Your foot, you have no idea as an American how your foot is so used to just going up a flight of stairs. But when you're in other countries, Bhutan too, you know what I mean? Like it's a step, you know, what do you want? You know, figure it out, use your eyes, it's a step. And I said, so the pelvis regulates that. It's not about leg length. You know, some people will pull the leg saying, oh, look, they're off by 1/4 inch. But again, if the pelvis is not regulating it, then it is a problem. She goes, well, what about 2.5 inches? And I'm like, what do you mean 2.5 inches? So his whole life, his leg was 2.5 inches longer than the other. So when he broke the leg at 88, they cut the femur 2.5 inches, took off his leg to even his legs out. So can you imagine me reaching for this. And now my gait being off 5 inches because they're taking away the orthotic and they're taking away the leg. His walk is 5 inches off. His height is 2.5 inches. So now his visual vestibular has gone down. So his sense of orientation is off. You know, I was like, well, what were you thinking? And she goes, oh, those orthotics were horrible. I'm like, but that's what his brain knew. So these conversations will happen your whole life. Right? It's just like if you came to me, what pillow should I use for my head? If you're concerned about your pillow and the quality of your pillow and worse a mattress, like swaddling, don't go towards the foam mattress. You'll ruin your back. You really will. Because we're not meant to be cradled like an egg carton. We move in our sleep just like a baby does. If you're having issues with sleep, that's where you get the movement lesson to help you work with your bed. But don't change the bed to secure your body. So we can have this conversation throughout life. Is your grandfather looking good after 5 hours of watching football and that lazy boy reclined and getting out of it? I wouldn't keep a child in 5 hours in a car seat. The car seat's there to get the child to Walmart, but you need to work on that. So these are things to consider for swaddling and for life. So again, I'm just gonna, I guess, throw this into a unit and just bring it up. But really, if you're telling someone to do or not to do something, find out why. Find out why you're doing it. I know most of you just see it and it's not correct or so forth, but the body's development is very interesting. But when we deviate it, but more so, you can't just say don't swaddle. Now you have to show that nervous system how to exist without the swaddling. And that's why swaddling becomes very addictive, right? Because a baby feels a movement, then they're like, oh, you know, and they wake up. Diane, who does my vision here, she had neuropathy. When I first met her, I gave her a lesson. It's the first time in 18 years she felt her feet. And she was, when she said she had neuropathy, I didn't mean, that she didn't have the sense of it. She hated me for a week because just the sheets on her feet, everything was so heightened. Things that we don't think about our shoes being on. But if you haven't felt your shoes in 18 years, so we go through these processes, but we really want to change the way a baby problem solves with movement early on and be available to them. So I hope that was great. I hope that wasn't too much information. The book, when you're in the middle of high-end book editing, so it's at the text editors now. I should have everything back to me by next Wednesday and working on final formats. So I think it'll come in right in our U.S. election. So good luck shipping these out, but it's getting there. Thanks, guys. Have a wonderful weekend. I'll see you soon. Bye.